She ran. Bare feet slapped hard against the dusty ground as the morning air tore through her lungs. The sun had barely risen, but fear was already awake. Her thin legs moved faster than they ever had, kicking up small clouds of brown dust behind her. "Come back here," a woman's voice screamed from behind. The girl did not look back. She knew the voice. Everyone in the compound knew it. The voice of anger. The voice of hunger. The voice that reminded her every day that she did not belong. She ran past mud houses still wrapped in sleep, past broken clay pots and sleeping goats, her faded brown dress flapping wildly around her small body. The dress was too big for her, like everything else in her life. Hand-me-downs, leftovers, insults. "Useless child," the woman shouted again. "You think you can run from me?" The girl's chest burned. Her throat felt tight. Still she ran. A stone cut into her heel. She stumbled but did not fall. Falling was dangerous. Falling meant being caught. Behind her, the heavy footsteps of the woman grew louder. "She is nothing," the woman yelled to no one in particular. "Nothing. Hear me? Nothing." The word landed harder than any slap. The girl's eyes stung, but she kept running. People were beginning to wake now. A man stepped out of his hut and watched silently. A woman carrying water paused and shook her head. "No use," someone muttered. "That one is nothing." The girl heard it all. She always did. She reached the edge of the compound and tripped, finally crashing into the dust. Her palms scraped raw against the ground. Pain shot through her arms, but before she could move, a hand grabbed the back of her dress and yanked her up. "Where do you think you're going?" the woman snapped, breathing heavily. The girl hung limply in her grip, too tired to fight. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her dark brown skin was coated in dust, making her look even smaller, even more fragile. I was just," the girl tried to speak. "Just what?" the woman interrupted, shoving her back toward the compound. "Just wasting my food? Just breathing my air." "I didn't do anything," the girl whispered. The woman laughed bitterly. "You never do anything. That is your problem." She dragged the girl across the ground and pushed her into the yard. The girl fell to her knees, coughing. "You wake up before everyone," the woman continued angrily. "You eat our food. You sleep under our roof. And still you are useless." The girl lowered her head. She had learned that looking up only made things worse. "What is your name?" a neighbor's child asked quietly from nearby. The woman answered before the girl could open her mouth. "She has no name," she said. "She is nothing." The girl flinched. Nothing. That was what they called her when they wanted to hurt her. That was what they called her when they wanted to remind her that she was alone. The woman turned to her again. "Get up," she barked. "The pots are waiting. Or do you think food cooks itself?" The girl pushed herself to her feet slowly, every muscle aching. She nodded once, silently, and walked toward the kitchen hut. As she passed the doorway, she caught her reflection in a cracked metal plate leaning against the wall. A small face stared back at her. Narrow. Tired. Eyes too big for a body that had learned hunger too early. She stared at herself for a second longer than usual. Then she whispered so softly that no one heard. "I am not nothing." And she stepped inside. She knelt on the hard kitchen floor before the sun had fully risen. The ground was cold, rough against her knees, but she did not complain. Complaining only invited more shouting. In front of her lay a pile of blackened pots, their bottoms thick with soot and yesterday's burnt food. A small bowl of water sat beside them, already turning dark. "Scrub properly," the woman's voice snapped from behind her. "Or do you want people to say I keep a lazy thing in my house?" The girl dipped her hands into the water and picked up the first pot. The metal was heavy, heavier than her thin arms liked. She began to scrub slowly, carefully, her fingers already sore from the previous day. The woman paced behind her, wrapper rustling, sandals slapping against the floor. "Look at you," the woman continued. "Other children wake up and go to school. You wake up and sit like a stone." The girl said nothing. "You don't answer," the woman barked. "Yes, Auntie," the girl whispered without looking up. Louder. "Yes, Auntie," she repeated, her voice trembling. The woman stopped walking. "Do you think I enjoy shouting?" she said sharply. "Do you think food falls from the sky? You eat here, don't you?" The girl nodded, still scrubbing. "You sleep here." Another nod. So you must work, the woman said. That is your only value. The word value made the girl's hands pause for a split second. The woman noticed. She always noticed. Why did you stop? She shouted. I didn't, the girl said quickly, scrubbing harder. The rough sponge scraped against the metal, biting into her skin. Her fingers stung, but she kept going. Her mind drifted, just for a moment, to the sound she had heard the previous day. Children reciting numbers outside the school. 1, 2, 3, she murmured under her breath. What did you say? The woman snapped. Nothing, the girl replied instinctively. The woman laughed sharply. At least you know your name. The laughter echoed in the small kitchen and settled deep in the girl's chest. Another pot slipped from her hands and clanged loudly against the floor. Clumsy thing, the woman shouted and kicked the pot toward her. You want to break everything I own? I'm sorry, the girl said, her voice cracking. Sorry doesn't feed people, the woman replied. If you were not here, I would have peace. The girl swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight, like something was stuck there. She wanted to ask a question, one that had lived inside her for a long time, but she was afraid. Still the words escaped. Auntie, she said softly. What? Why don't I go to school? The woman froze. Then she turned slowly, eyes narrowing. School? She repeated. Did you hear yourself? The girl lowered her head. I just thought. Thought? The woman interrupted. Since when do you think? The girl's shoulders shook, but she did not cry. You want school when you don't even know where you came from, the woman continued. When you don't know your parents. When nobody wanted you. Each word landed like a stone. People like you don't go to school, the woman said coldly. School is for children with futures. She leaned closer. You have none. The girl's hand slowed again, then stopped. The woman raised her hand sharply. Move. The girl flinched and resumed scrubbing, her tears finally dropping into the dirty water, disappearing without a trace. Outside, laughter drifted in, children passing by, uniforms clean, voices bright. The girl listened quietly. Inside her chest, something small but stubborn refused to die. As the woman turned away, muttering under her breath, the girl whispered again, so quietly it barely existed. I can learn. The pots shone slightly now, but her hands were bleeding. She did not stop. She stood at the edge of the compound, hidden behind a mud wall cracked by years of sun and rain. The morning had fully awakened now. The village road was alive with movement. Children passed in small groups, their feet clean, their uniforms neatly pressed. Some laughed loudly. Others dragged their bags, already tired before lessons even began. The girl watched them without moving. Her faded dress hung loosely on her thin frame, the hem brushing against her dusty ankles. Her toes curled slightly in the sand, as if gripping the ground to stop herself from stepping forward. A boy walked past, swinging his school bag carelessly. I hate mathematics, he complained to his friend. The girl's lips parted slightly. Mathematics. The word tasted strange and beautiful in her mouth. Another group passed, chanting something together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Their voices rose and fell like music. The girl's heart beat faster. She counted along silently, her fingers twitching at her sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. She smiled before she could stop herself. Hey! A girl in a blue uniform noticed her and pointed. Why are you staring? The girl stiffened. I wasn't, she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. The schoolgirl frowned. Why aren't you in uniform? The girl looked down at her dress, at the torn seam near the shoulder. I don't go to school. The schoolgirl's expression shifted, confusion, then something close to pity. Oh, she said. Then after a pause, why? The girl opened her mouth. No answer came out. A teacher's voice rang out from down the road. Hurry up. Assembly is starting. The children ran off, their laughter trailing behind them like dust in sunlight. The girl remained where she was. When the road finally emptied, the silence felt heavy. She stepped closer to the path slowly, as if afraid the ground might reject her. She bent down and picked up a small stick lying near her feet. With it, she drew a crooked line in the sand. A line. Then another. She stared at them, her brow furrowed in concentration. This is one, she whispered to herself. She added another line beside it. This is too. Her smile returned, faint but real. What are you doing? She jumped. The woman stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Nothing, the girl said immediately, dropping the stick. Nothing again, the woman repeated with a sigh. You like that word too much. The girl's face burned. You should be fetching water, the woman continued. Instead you are standing like a fool. I was just what? The woman snapped. Learning. The girl's silence was answer enough. The woman laughed loudly. You think learning will change who you are? She stepped closer. Look at you. Skin and bones. No parents. No name. The girl's eyes filled, but she forced them dry. You see those children? The woman said, pointing down the road. They belong somewhere. You belong here. The girl clenched her fists. Yes, Auntie, she whispered. The woman turned and walked away, already calling out instructions for more chores. The girl remained still for a moment longer. She looked down at the lines she had drawn before they were disturbed by footsteps and wind. They were gone now, but she remembered them. As she turned back toward the compound, her chest felt tight but not empty. 1, 2. The numbers followed her inside, quiet and stubborn, like a secret promise she refused to forget. Night fell quietly over the village. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth wet and fragrant. The girl lay on her thin mat, the small lamp flickering weakly beside her. The wind whispered outside, rustling the thatched roofs, but inside the room was still and warm. She held her pencil tightly in her small hands, her fingers stiff from exhaustion. Her dark brown skin glistened faintly in the lamp's soft glow. Her narrow oval face tense with focus, large almond-shaped eyes wide and alert. Her short, tightly braided hair stuck close to her scalp. The torn exercise book was open on the floor before her, pages filled with letters, numbers, and faint sketches of shapes she was learning to draw. I have to, she whispered to herself. I can't be nothing. She traced numbers carefully, mumbling them under her breath. 4. Her pencil slipped, smearing the page. She bit her lip, frustrated. I can't mess up, she muttered. Not again. Her stomach growled faintly. Hunger was still there, gnawing at her, but she ignored it. Hunger was temporary. Knowledge, numbers, letters was something she could keep. Something no one could take from her. A shadow moved across the room as the woman entered quietly, carrying a small cup of water. She knelt beside the girl without saying a word, setting the cup down. The girl glanced up briefly, large dark eyes blinking in surprise, then returned to her work. You're working late, the woman said softly, her voice calm and steady. Don't tire yourself too much. I want to learn, the girl replied, her voice trembling slightly. I need to. The woman nodded, as if she understood exactly. Then learn. But remember, rest is part of learning too. The girl went back to her page, tracing letters slowly. She paused, running her fingers over the words she had written earlier. Each line was imperfect, crooked, smudged, but they were hers. Each stroke a tiny victory. Tomorrow, she whispered. I will do better tomorrow. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the walls. The girl shivered slightly but kept her focus. Her narrow face, set in determination, glowed in the soft lamplight. She traced another line of numbers. 5, 6, 7, each one a challenge she was determined to meet. Her mind drifted for a moment to the children she had seen walking to school. The ones who had laughed at her, whispered about her, ignored her. For a heartbeat, a sting of bitterness rose in her chest. Then she pushed it down. Anger would not help her now. Only learning would. She worked for hours, ignoring the hunger, the ache in her small body, the fatigue in her limbs. Each number, each letter, each word she traced was a small act of defiance. A proof that she existed. A proof that she was more than what the village called her. By the time her eyelids began to droop, she had filled half a page with letters and numbers. She leaned back, exhausted, but her chest swelled with a quiet pride. For the first time, the girl realized that even if the world refused to see her, even if they continued to call her nothing, she had a secret that no one could take. Her mind, her will, and her determination to learn. She curled up on the mat, her eyes finally closing. The pencil rested beside her page. The lamp flickered one last time, and in the darkness, a small spark of hope burned quietly in her chest. She was still small, She was still fragile. But inside she was growing. And no one, not the village, not the woman who had called her nothing, not even fate itself, could take that away. Morning came again as it always did, without asking if she was ready. The girl woke before the call to prayer, her eyes already open, staring at the cracked ceiling of the kitchen hut. The night's darkness still clung to her thoughts. Numbers floated in her mind. Letters followed them, quiet and patient. She sat up slowly and rubbed her eyes. Her body ached in places she did not have names for, but she ignored it. Pain was familiar. Pain was predictable. What frightened her was hope. It came and went without warning. She rose and stepped outside to wash her face at the clay pot near the wall. The water was cold. She splashed it onto her cheeks and leaned closer to the surface. Her reflection stared back. A small girl with dark brown skin stretched tightly over sharp cheekbones. Her face was narrow, almost too narrow for her large almond-shaped eyes. Those eyes were dark and deep, always watching, always listening. Her lips were dry and cracked, her hair braided tightly against her scalp, short and neat but neglected. She studied herself quietly. "Who are you?" she whispered. The water rippled, distorting her face. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Why are you standing there like that?" the woman's voice snapped. The girl straightened immediately. "I was just washing, Auntie." The woman scoffed. "Washing what? There is nothing on you worth washing." The words settled heavily in the air. The girl stepped aside as the woman dipped her own hands into the water, splashing her face roughly. Not a single drop was offered to the girl again. "Go and sweep," the woman said, wiping her face. "People will soon pass." The girl picked up the broom and began sweeping the compound. Dust rose with every stroke, clinging to her skin. She swept carefully, methodically, as if perfection might earn her mercy. It never did. A neighbor passed by and glanced at her briefly. Their eyes met for half a second. Then the neighbor looked away. The girl felt it like a slap. She swept faster. Inside her chest, questions piled up, heavy and unanswered. Why did no one ask her how she felt? Why did no one wonder what she thought? Why did no one see her face and pause? "Auntie," she said suddenly, without planning to. The woman turned sharply. "What now? Did I do something wrong?" the girl asked. The woman laughed, short and bitter. "You were born. That is what you did wrong." The girl nodded slowly, absorbing the answer as if it were a rule of the world. "Yes, Auntie," she said. The woman shook her head and walked away, muttering, "Talking too much, as if that will change anything." The girl continued sweeping. A group of children passed again on their way to school. One of them glanced at her and frowned slightly, as if trying to remember something. The girl looked away first. Her chest tightened, not with jealousy but with something closer to grief. She wondered what it would feel like to be looked at and seen. Not judged. Not dismissed. Seen. Later, while washing plates, she caught her reflection again in a metal bowl. The image was warped, stretched, broken. She touched her cheek lightly. "I am here," she whispered to the reflection. "I exist." No one answered. But she repeated it anyway, under her breath, again and again, like a prayer she hoped someone somewhere might hear. By evening, her body was tired, but her eyes remained awake. As she lay back down on the kitchen floor, staring into the dark, she made herself a promise, one she did not yet know how to keep. If no one would see her, she would learn to see herself. And one day she would make the world look at her face and remember it, even if they had once called her nothing. The sun was high and hot, beating down on the dusty village road. The girl carried a small bucket of water from the well, her hands raw from the rough rope. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she did not complain. She had learned that complaints only invited more trouble. She was nearly back to the compound when a shout split the air. "Stop her! Stop her now!" Her heart froze. She turned and saw the heavy-set woman running toward her, face red with anger, arms flailing. Behind her, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors, children, and a few men sitting outside their huts, all staring at the scene with curiosity and expectation. "What did I do?" the girl whispered, clutching the bucket tightly. "Don't play dumb," the woman shouted. "I saw you take it. You stole food again." I didn't," the girl stammered, stepping backward. Her dark brown eyes were wide with panic, her narrow face showing every line of fear. The tight braids on her scalp swayed as she trembled. A child from the crowd pointed at her. She took it. I saw her. The girl's stomach sank. She knew it was a lie. She had not touched the food. But no one would believe her. They never did. Enough! The woman shouted. She grabbed the girl by the arm and yanked her forward. Into the center of the village now. Let everyone see the thief. The girl's legs trembled as she was dragged, kicking and protesting through the dusty street. Villagers stepped aside, some murmuring, some shaking their heads. Children clutched each other's hands, their wide eyes staring. Why do you always punish me for things I didn't do? The girl whispered, barely audible, tears forming in her large dark eyes. Because that is who you are, the woman barked. Nothing. Always nothing. Nothing but trouble. The words hit harder than any slap could. The girl's lips quivered, and a tear rolled down her sunken cheek. A man from the crowd stepped closer. She is just a child, he said cautiously. The woman turned on him. A child who steals. A child who deserves discipline. The girl tried to pull free, but the woman's grip was iron. Her small frame was no match. She stumbled, falling to her knees in the dust. Her palms scraped raw against the ground. She tried to gather herself, but the eyes of the village felt like knives, piercing every part of her. You see this? The woman shouted. This is what nothing looks like. You will learn your place. The girl swallowed hard, fighting back sobs. She wanted to shout, to scream, to tell everyone the truth. But no sound came out. Her voice was small, weak, invisible, just like she was. Finally, the woman let go and pushed her forward. The girl fell onto her hands and knees, the bucket tipping over and spilling water into the dust. She looked around. The crowd had begun to whisper. Some shook their heads, others laughed softly. The humiliation burned hotter than the sun. She wanted to disappear. If she could melt into the dust beneath her, maybe the pain would stop. Maybe no one would see her at all. But even as the thought passed, her hands itched to pick herself up. Her chest ached, her head spun, but a small stubborn part of her refused to vanish. She looked at the ground, then at the faces watching her. I didn't do it, she whispered under her breath, barely loud enough for herself to hear. And even though the words felt fragile, they were the first spark of something she had never allowed herself before. A spark that whispered, maybe one day they will see me differently. For now, the girl remained on her knees in the dust, humiliated, trembling, and alone. But inside, something small and stubborn had begun to stir. The sky darkened suddenly, as if the heavens themselves were angry. Clouds rolled across the sun, swallowing the village in a gray shadow. A sudden drop of rain splashed onto the girl's cheek, cold and shocking. She looked up, startled. Then another. And another. Within minutes, the drizzle had become a downpour. The dust turned to mud beneath her bare feet. Her thin dress clung to her frail body, soaked and heavy. The girl shivered, but there was no time to stop. Behind her, the woman's angry voice cut through the storm. Run, she screamed. You cannot escape your punishment. The girl turned to see her pursuer charging toward her, sandals slapping the wet ground, wrapper flapping wildly. Fear made her legs move faster than she ever thought possible. The rain blurred her vision, stinging her eyes. Her short, tightly braided hair stuck to her scalp. The mud sucked at her feet. She slipped, her hands hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through her palms, but she pushed forward. Stop her! A villager shouted from the doorway of a mud house. She's nothing. Nothing. The word hit her ears like a knife. Nothing. She was always nothing in their eyes. Even the rain, cold and relentless, could not wash it away. She ran toward the edge of the compound, water running down her face. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her chest burning. Every muscle ached, but she did not stop. Falling meant being caught, and being caught meant humiliation she could not bear again. Her small feet slipped in the mud. She fell forward, hitting her hands and knees. The cold water seeped through her clothes, chilling her thin body. The woman's footsteps drew closer. You think you can escape? The woman yelled. You are nothing. Nothing. The girl scrambled to her feet, trembling, her skin slick with rain. She looked around desperately. There was no help. No one would intervene. The villagers watched from their doorways, whispering. Some shook their heads, some laughed softly. She stumbled toward the riverbank at the edge of the village, hoping she could hide, maybe slip into the tall grass, maybe disappear into the gray rain. But the woman caught up to her, grabbing her by the shoulder with surprising strength. "Stop struggling, useless child," the woman hissed. The girl's hands clawed at the mud, her fingernails breaking against the wet ground. She felt her chest tighten, a panic she had never known before. Her large almond-shaped eyes filled with tears mixing with the rain. Suddenly, a flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene. The woman's face twisted with rage, her heavy-set frame looming. The girl's narrow face, sunken cheeks, and tight braids shone wet and determined in the light. She screamed. Not for mercy, not for help, but a scream that carried all the pain, fear, and anger she had been forced to swallow for years. The sound startled the woman, just enough for the girl to wrench free. She ran blindly through the mud, slipping and falling, then rising again, soaked, cold, and exhausted. The river's edge was near. Water gushed fast, dark and churning from the sudden storm. It looked impossible to cross, but the girl did not stop. She clung to the desperate thought that if she could just survive this, maybe, just maybe, something better waited for her. The woman's voice echoed behind her. "Nothing. You cannot run from who you are." The girl's chest heaved, mud and rain dripping from her hair and face. She did not answer. She only ran. For the first time, she realized that running was no longer about punishment. Running was about survival. Running was about being seen somewhere, anywhere, as more than nothing. Her fingers brushed against the riverbank. She stumbled forward, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that the water might wash away everything. The fear, the insults, the name they had forced upon her. She fell forward into the mud at the edge of the water, panting, shivering, and soaked to the bone. The rain thundered around her, but she closed her eyes, feeling something strange: strength, determination, a stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. She was soaked. She was small. She was still nothing in their eyes. But she was running, and that made all the difference. The girl lay on the muddy road, chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The rain had soaked her completely, drenching her thin brown dress, clinging to her small frame, and dripping into the cracks of her tightly braided hair. Her dark brown skin gleamed in the dim gray light, but it did nothing to protect her from the cold seeping into her bones. She tried to push herself up, but her limbs felt like lead. Every movement hurt. Her hands, scraped raw from the mud, refused to obey. Her stomach growled, protesting with a deep, hollow hunger she had learned to ignore for years. Above her, the clouds rumbled, echoing the panic that beat in her chest. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the tears and rain from her large almond-shaped eyes. Her narrow oval face, sunken cheeks, and small cracked lips were streaked with mud and water, making her look even smaller than she felt. "Please let me stay," she whispered to herself, voice barely audible over the storm. She had no one to plead to, no one who cared. The villagers had gone back to their homes. The woman's shouts had faded into the distance. She was utterly alone. Her head drooped onto the muddy ground, and the rain stung her face. She tried to remember what had made her run in the first place, what spark of hope had fueled her escape. But it all seemed to wash away in the pounding water, leaving only fear and exhaustion. A sharp crack of lightning lit the sky, and the world seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, she imagined slipping beneath the water and mud and disappearing forever. Maybe that was what nothing was meant to be. A life so small it could vanish without a trace. Her eyes closed, and for a heartbeat, she let herself sink into that thought. Then a voice cut through the storm. "Are you okay?" The girl's eyes snapped open. A figure approached through the rain. A woman, older than herself, slim but strong, with deep brown skin, an oval face, and eyes that held quiet concern. Her gray-streaked hair peeked out from beneath a simple headscarf. She wore a faded wrapper, and her bare feet squelched against the wet earth. The girl blinked, unsure. "Who?" she croaked. The woman knelt beside her, reaching out carefully. "It's okay. You're safe now. Can you sit up?" The girl tried but failed, collapsing back into the mud. Her hands shook as she lifted them weakly. The woman gently guided her upright, supporting her small frame. Her eyes studied the girl's face closely, narrow, tired, with prominent cheekbones and large almond-shaped dark eyes full of fear and pain. Her thin arms trembled under the weight of her own exhaustion. "You don't have to run anymore," the woman said softly. "No one will hurt you here." The girl blinked, overwhelmed. "No one? No one?" the woman repeated, steady and calm. You are not nothing. You are here, and that matters. The words hit her with a strange warmth. She had never been called anything but nothing. To hear something different made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. Her hands brushed the mud from her face, then froze. She studied the woman's gentle eyes, searching for signs of mockery or anger. But there were none. Only patience. Only understanding. The girl leaned into the woman's side, weak and trembling, and for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to rest. The rain continued to pour, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it seemed to wash the edges of fear and shame just enough to let her breathe. I didn't know anyone could care, she whispered, voice cracking. The woman smiled faintly, adjusting the girl's soaked dress. Some of us do, she said. And some of us will help you learn that being called nothing doesn't make it true. The girl closed her eyes, letting the words settle deep into her chest. Even if no one else believed in her, even if the world still called her nothing, this one person did. And that, for the first time, was enough to keep her alive. She shivered, but this time it was not just from the rain. It was from a spark of hope she could not yet name, but could feel growing stronger inside her. The girl sat on the mat in the small, dim room, her soaked dress clinging to her tiny frame. Her dark brown skin glistened faintly from the rain, her narrow oval face streaked with mud and tears, and her large almond-shaped eyes were wide with fear and disbelief. She had never been treated with gentleness before. The woman knelt in front of her, placing a small bowl of warm porridge on the floor. Steam rose from it, curling in the air like a soft invitation. Her hands were steady, her movements careful. Her deep brown eyes met the girl's, calm and unjudging. Eat, she said softly. You need strength. The girl stared at the food, hesitant. Her stomach ached, but she had learned to distrust kindness. Why? She whispered, her voice cracking. Because no one should go hungry if I can help it, the woman replied. Not you. Not anyone. Tears pricked the girl's eyes again. She lowered her head, afraid to accept something so simple and strange. Slowly, she picked up a spoon, her thin fingers trembling. The warmth of the porridge against her palms made her flinch, but she tasted it. Sweet. Soft. Safe. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she ate without fear of being scolded or shooed away. She swallowed carefully, savoring the warmth that spread through her empty stomach. The woman watched quietly, her face gentle but steady. You don't have to hide from me, she said. I won't hurt you. You can stay here. The girl's fingers tightened around the spoon. I don't know how to stay, she whispered. The woman shook her head. You'll learn. We all have to start somewhere. After a few more bites, the girl dared to glance at the woman. Her large almond-shaped eyes, so accustomed to fear and dismissal, met the kind woman's patient gaze. The contrast was jarring, almost too bright. The girl's narrow oval face twitched with emotion, unsure if she should smile or cry. You are safe here, the woman said again, noticing the hesitation. Nothing will touch you while you are with me. You can rest, you can learn, you can just be. The words were strange in her ears. Be? She asked. Yes, the woman replied, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Be yourself. That is enough. The girl's lips trembled. She wanted to believe it but had spent years being told she was nothing, worthless, unwanted. Slowly though, she picked up the spoon again. One bite at a time she ate. She felt the warmth of the food spread into her chest, mingling with the tiny spark that had begun in the rain earlier. Hope. She had forgotten it existed. But now it stirred quietly, insisting she notice it. The woman cleaned a small corner for her to sleep, laying down a thin mat. Tonight you sleep, she said. Tomorrow we will talk. You will learn, little one. But tonight rest. The girl lowered herself onto the mat, shivering slightly from exhaustion. She stared at the ceiling of the small hut, her narrow face relaxed for the first time in months. Her short, tightly braided hair stuck damply to her scalp, but it did not matter. Her large almond-shaped eyes finally closed slowly. Somewhere deep inside she whispered again under her breath. Maybe I am not nothing. The woman watched her settle, a faint smile on her face. You never were, she whispered back almost to herself, and for the first time in a long time, the girl allowed herself to imagine a life that could be more than just survival. The sun was warm against her dark brown skin as the girl approached the small school building for the first time. Her feet were bare, the dust of the village clinging to them, and her faded oversized dress fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. Her narrow oval face was tense, eyes wide and alert, large almond-shaped dark brown eyes scanning everything. Her short, tightly braided hair stuck close to her scalp, damp with sweat from the short walk. The schoolyard was bustling. Children in clean uniforms ran and laughed, their voices rising in a chaotic chorus. Their polished shoes kicked up small clouds of dust that smelled faintly of chalk and sweat. The girl stayed at the edge of the yard, clutching a small, worn book the woman had given her, the edges frayed and the pages soft with age. A boy glanced at her and whispered something to his friend, who laughed softly. Another child pointed, their curious eyes following her slow steps. She felt the weight of their gazes, the unspoken judgment, and shrank a little deeper into herself. I don't belong here," she murmured almost to herself. The kind woman's words echoed in her mind. "You are not nothing." The girl took a deep breath, her chest tight, and stepped forward. Each movement felt deliberate, almost like a battle. She approached the entrance of the classroom, her fingers brushing the wooden door, worn and scratched with years of use. The teacher looked up, eyebrows raised. Her dark brown skin and calm expression reminded the girl of the woman who had saved her. "Hello," the teacher said, her voice soft but firm. "Can I help you?" The girl swallowed. I want to learn," she said quietly. Her voice shook, but it carried a small spark of determination. The teacher's eyes softened. "Come in then. Sit anywhere." Inside, the classroom smelled faintly of chalk dust and old paper. The walls were cracked but clean. Children were seated at small wooden desks, some whispering, some focused on their lessons. The girl's hand shook slightly as she placed her book on the nearest empty desk. Her large eyes scanned the chalkboard and the teacher's calm posture. She had never seen numbers and letters arranged like this. She had only traced them on scraps of paper in the dim glow of the oil lamp at night. And yet a thrill ran through her small body. She could do this. She could learn. The teacher wrote a series of numbers on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4. The girl's heart leapt. She whispered the sequence under her breath, lips barely moving. 1, 4. A boy leaned over and snickered. "You're slow," he whispered. The girl looked at him, her lips pressed together. A flash of anger rose in her chest, but she swallowed it. This was not the place for tears or fighting. She focused on the numbers again, tracing them on the page with her pencil. 1, 3, she repeated quietly, her narrow face set with concentration. Her hands trembled, but she refused to stop. The teacher noticed and smiled faintly. "Good," she said softly, nodding in encouragement. "Keep going." For the first time, someone believed in her ability to learn. Not for chores, not for obedience, not because she was useful, but because she had a mind and it deserved to grow. Outside, laughter and voices continued, but inside the small classroom, a quiet determination took root. The girl's large almond-shaped eyes, once filled with fear and doubt, now glimmered with possibility. Her small body still seemed fragile, but her mind was awake and it was hungry. She picked up her pencil and wrote the numbers again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her lips quivered with a small smile. For the first time she felt something she had never felt before, hope. And in that classroom, with the teacher's patient guidance and the worn pages of her little book, she took the first real step away from being nothing. Night fell quietly over the village. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth wet and fragrant. The girl lay on her thin mat, the small lamp flickering weakly beside her. The wind whispered outside, rustling the thatched roofs, but inside, the room was still and warm. She held her pencil tightly in her small hands, her fingers stiff from exhaustion. Her dark brown skin glistened faintly in the lamp's soft glow. Her narrow oval face tense with focus, large almond-shaped eyes wide and alert. Her short, tightly braided hair stuck close to her scalp. The torn exercise book was open on the floor before her, pages filled with letters, numbers, and faint sketches of shapes she was learning to draw. I have to, she whispered to herself. I can't be nothing. She traced numbers carefully, mumbling them under her breath. 1, 4. Her pencil slipped, smearing the page. She bit her lip, frustrated. I can't mess up, she muttered. Not again. Her stomach growled faintly. Hunger was still there, gnawing at her, but she ignored it. Hunger was temporary. Knowledge, numbers, letters was something she could keep. Something no one could take from her. A shadow moved across the room as the woman entered quietly, carrying a small cup of water. She knelt beside the girl without saying a word, setting the cup down. The girl glanced up briefly, large dark eyes blinking in surprise, then returned to her work. "You're working late," the woman said softly, her voice calm and steady. "Don't tire yourself too much." I want to learn," the girl replied, her voice trembling slightly. I need to." The woman nodded, as if she understood exactly. "Then learn. But remember, rest is part of learning too." The girl went back to her page, tracing letters slowly. She paused, running her fingers over the words she had written earlier. Each line was imperfect, crooked, smudged, but they were hers. Each stroke a tiny victory. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "I will do better tomorrow." Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the walls. The girl shivered slightly but kept her focus. Her narrow face, set in determination, glowed in the soft lamplight. She traced another line of numbers. 5, 6, 7, each one a challenge she was determined to meet. Her mind drifted for a moment to the children she had seen walking to school, the ones who had laughed at her, whispered about her, ignored her. For a heartbeat, a sting of bitterness rose in her chest. Then she pushed it down. Anger would not help her now. Only learning would. She worked for hours, ignoring the hunger, the ache in her small body, the fatigue in her limbs. Each number, each letter, each word she traced was a small act of defiance. A proof that she existed. A proof that she was more than what the village called her. By the time her eyelids began to droop, she had filled half a page with letters and numbers. She leaned back, exhausted, but her chest swelled with a quiet pride. For the first time, the girl realized that even if the world refused to see her, even if they continued to call her nothing, she had a secret that no one could take. Her mind, her will, and her determination to learn. She curled up on the mat, her eyes finally closing. The pencil rested beside her page. The lamp flickered one last time, and in the darkness, a small spark of hope burned quietly in her chest. She was still small. She was still fragile. But inside she was growing. And no one, not the village, not the woman who had called her nothing, not even fate itself, could take that away. The years passed slowly, but they passed. The girl grew taller, her body lean but strong, shaped by years of work, hunger, and determination. Her dark brown skin gleamed with health now, smooth except for faint scars on her hands and knees from all the falls and scrapes of her childhood. Her narrow oval face matured, the sunken cheeks now giving way to subtle curves. Her large almond-shaped dark brown eyes retained their depth, now carrying quiet confidence and a spark of stubborn pride. Her short, tightly braided hair remained a part of her identity, neat and practical. She walked to school each morning without hesitation. The little book she had once treasured now filled with neat, careful handwriting, numbers and words that flowed across pages. She no longer feared the stares of the other children. Instead, she observed them, learning not just from books but from life itself. "Miss Zara, you are fast today," the teacher said one morning, noticing her quick grasp of arithmetic. Zara smiled faintly, adjusting her school bag. "I like numbers," she replied simply. "They make sense." Her classmates whispered among themselves. Some still remembered the small girl who had once been nothing. Now they watched with cautious curiosity as she worked, determined and precise. They could see the quiet force behind her almond-shaped eyes, the way she moved with purpose, and the way her narrow face seemed to hold both thought and fire. After school, she returned to the woman's home. The mat and lamp were still there, a constant reminder of the nights she had spent learning when no one believed in her. She would sit on the floor, tracing letters, reading aloud to herself, practicing numbers until her voice was confident and clear. One evening, as she worked by the flickering lamp, the woman watched her quietly. "You've grown strong, Zara," she said, voice soft but steady. Zara looked up, her narrow face calm, lips set with determination. "I had to," she said. "I cannot be nothing." The woman nodded. "And you are not. You never were." Zara returned to her work, tracing numbers and letters across the page, filling them with precision. Each stroke was a declaration: I exist. I will not be ignored. I will learn. I will grow. Outside, the village continued its routines, indifferent to her progress. But inside, in the quiet room, something had changed. She no longer trembled at shouts or fell into fear when called names. She had found a secret power, the power of knowledge, persistence, and belief in herself. Her hands, once raw and trembling, now moved with confidence. Her narrow oval face, once lined with fear and doubt, now radiated quiet strength. Her large almond-shaped eyes held both memory and ambition, a map of the journey she had endured and the path she would follow. Zara knew the world still might call her nothing, might still try to dismiss her. But she had learned a truth no one could take. She was more than names, more than labels, more than judgment. She was Zara, the girl who ran in the rain, who traced numbers in the dark, who refused to vanish. And now, as she closed her book for the night, she allowed herself a small, proud smile. The girl who had been called nothing had survived. She had grown. She had learned. And she would not stop until the world had no choice but to see her. The morning of the exam arrived like a storm that Zara had been anticipating for months. The schoolyard buzzed with nervous energy. Children whispered, shuffled their papers, and adjusted their uniforms. Zara stood at the edge of the courtyard, her dark brown skin glowing in the early sun, narrow oval face set with quiet determination, and her large almond-shaped eyes focused and alert. Her short, tightly braided hair stayed in place, neat and practical as always. Her stomach fluttered, but it was not fear, at least not entirely. It was anticipation, the kind that comes from knowing how far she had come. She clutched her pencil tightly, the little stub now worn from years of use, and her notebook was tucked under her arm. "Remember," the teacher said softly, walking past the students, "this is a test of what you've learned, not your worth. Your worth is already known." Zara's lips pressed together, barely forming a smile. "I know mine now," she thought. When the teacher handed out the papers, the whispers around her intensified. Some children glanced sideways, some murmured, "She's smart now," while others whispered doubts. "She's still the one they called nothing." Zara ignored them. She flipped open her paper and scanned the questions. Numbers, letters, basic arithmetic, things she had traced, counted, and written 1,000 times in her candlelit nights and rainy mornings. Her fingers tingled as she picked up her pencil and began to work. 1 + 1, she muttered under her breath, tracing the numbers carefully, her narrow face scrunched in concentration, lips moving as if the pencil guided her voice. Her large eyes darted across the page, absorbing each problem, calculating each solution. Time passed. The sounds of pencils scratching paper, the shuffle of feet, and quiet whispers filled the room. But Zara was in her own world. Every question was a small battle, and she met each one with patience, persistence, and precision. A boy from the neighboring desk leaned over and whispered, "You're fast. I didn't think you could do it." Zara's lips twitched into a faint smile. "I can," she replied softly, eyes never leaving her paper. By the end of the exam, her page was filled with neat numbers and letters, each one a testament to years of struggle, learning, and determination. She handed it in, hands steady, heart beating with quiet pride. The teacher glanced at her paper later that day. Her expression softened. "Excellent work, Zara. You've earned every mark here. More importantly, you've shown what persistence can achieve." Zara's chest swelled with a quiet fire. It wasn't about the grades alone. It was proof to herself that she could overcome the whispers, the mockery, the name she had been given. She was more than nothing. As she walked home through the village, her notebook under her arm, the wind brushing her face, Zara noticed people glancing at her differently. Some children looked curious. Some adults nodded subtly. She didn't need their validation. She had already seen herself clearly, and that was enough. That evening, she sat by the lamp once more, tracing numbers and letters in her notebook. The spark inside her burned brighter than ever, fueled by accomplishment and determination. Every stroke, every line was a reminder. She had faced her first real test and had not faltered. The girl they had called nothing was becoming someone who could not be ignored. The next day, Zara walked to school with her notebook tucked under her arm, her narrow oval face set in quiet determination, and her large almond-shaped eyes scanning the familiar path. The sun highlighted the smooth glow of her dark brown skin, and her short, tightly braided hair stayed neatly in place despite the early morning breeze. As she entered the schoolyard, whispers rippled through the children like wine through dry grass. Some giggled. Others pointed. "Look, it's her," one boy said, snickering. The girl they called nothing thinks she's smart now. Zara's chest tightened. Her stomach fluttered. But she refused to let the old fear dominate her. She squared her shoulders and held her head high. I am not nothing, she thought firmly. A group of children gathered near the classroom door, whispering and laughing. One girl stepped forward. I saw your test score, she said, voice sharp. You got some answers right, but everyone still knows. Nothing sticks in that head of yours. The words landed like stones, but Zara remained silent. Her narrow face did not twitch, her lips pressed together, and her large almond-shaped eyes stared calmly at the girl who had mocked her. Say something, the girl demanded, pointing a finger. Zara took a slow breath, her hands resting on her notebook. I may have been called nothing, she said, her voice low but steady. But I've learned. And I will keep learning. That is more than you can say for yourself. A hush fell over the crowd. The girl who had mocked her blinked, taken aback, unsure how to respond. The others whispered among themselves, a mix of awe and disbelief spreading through the yard. Zara opened her notebook and traced a few numbers and letters on the cover, letting her hands do the talking. 1, 2, 3 letters followed, precise and deliberate. Her narrow face softened slightly with quiet pride, and her large almond-shaped eyes shone with the quiet fire of someone who had survived, learned, and was growing stronger. You actually learned something, the girl said finally, her voice uncertain. Yes, Zara replied simply. I learned that being called nothing doesn't make it true. The mockery lost its edge, replaced by murmurs of curiosity and hesitant respect. Children stepped aside, some casting admiring glances. Adults in the schoolyard who had once overlooked her now noticed the quiet strength in her posture, the focus in her almond-shaped eyes, and the determination etched into her narrow oval face. As the day continued, Zara worked diligently, answering questions with confidence, raising her hand in class, and tracing neat numbers across her notebook. Each line, each answer, was a quiet defiance against the name that had been forced upon her. She had faced ridicule and had stood firm. By the time she walked home that afternoon, her notebook clutched to her chest, her dark brown skin glistening in the sun, and her hair neat and braided, Zara felt a surge of quiet victory. The girl they had once called nothing was no longer invisible. She was present. She was learning. And she was unstoppable. That night, as she traced numbers and letters by the lamp, the small flame casting shadows on her narrow face, she whispered to herself, I will not be nothing. I am Zara, and I will be seen. The next week brought a small but important change. The whispers and laughter that once followed Zara now carried a different tone, curiosity, and in some cases admiration. Children who had ignored her before began to approach cautiously, drawn by the quiet determination in her large almond-shaped eyes, and the confident way her narrow oval face held itself. One afternoon, as she traced numbers in her notebook under a tree outside the classroom, a girl with braids tied neatly at the back of her head approached. Her dark brown skin gleamed in the sunlight, and her round face held an expression of tentative friendliness. Hi, the girl said softly. I'm Amina. Can I sit with you? Zara blinked, her narrow face showing surprise. She had grown used to being avoided, ignored, and mocked. But something about Amina's voice, warm and steady, felt safe. Sure, Zara replied quietly, moving her notebook slightly to make room. Amina sat down, careful not to touch Zara, but close enough to bridge the gap. I saw how you answered questions in class today, she said. You're really good at this. Zara's lips pressed together, unsure how to respond. Compliments were rare, and she had learned to meet them with caution. Thank you, she said finally, her voice soft but steady. The two girls began to work together, tracing numbers, sharing pencils, and helping each other understand the lessons. Zara's narrow oval face gradually relaxed, her large almond-shaped eyes lighting with the quiet warmth of connection. Soon more children joined them, children who had once whispered about her being nothing. Now they laughed and learned together, their voices blending in an easy rhythm that felt unfamiliar but comforting to Zara. Her small frame, once overlooked, now became a quiet anchor for the group. Zara, can you show me how to do this? A boy asked, holding out a sheet of numbers. Zara nodded, pointing carefully at each number. 1, 2, 3, 4, she said, tracing each line deliberately. See? Just like this. The boy copied her, his wide eyes watching her every movement. Zara's chest swelled with a quiet pride. She had not only learned but was now teaching. She had begun to turn her so-called nothingness into something others could see and rely on. As the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the schoolyard, Zara and her new friends laughed together, solving problems, sharing mistakes, and celebrating small victories. The narrow oval lines of her face softened with genuine joy, and her large almond-shaped eyes sparkled, free from the fear that had once consumed her. Later, when she returned home, the woman who had guided her smiled knowingly. "Looks like you found your people," she said. Zara nodded, her chest warm. "Yes," she said softly. They see me for what I can do, not what I was called." The woman's eyes gleamed with pride. "That is how it begins, Zara. Not just learning but being seen." That night, Zara lay on her mat by the lamp, tracing letters in her notebook. She paused, glancing at the shadows dancing on the walls. A new sense of belonging settled in her chest, quiet and steady. She was no longer alone. She had friends. She had hope. She had herself. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where the word nothing could never touch her again. Word spread through the village quickly. A test of knowledge had been announced. A challenge where children from every household would gather in the central square to answer questions, solve problems, and demonstrate what they had learned. For Zara, it was both terrifying and exhilarating. The morning of the challenge, she walked toward the square, her dark brown skin glinting in the rising sun, narrow oval face set in quiet determination, large almond-shaped eyes alert and focused. Her short, tightly braided hair stayed in place, and her small hands clutched her notebook as if it were armor. Children from other compounds stared at her as she entered. Some whispered. Some laughed. Some tried to intimidate her with cold glares. But Zara kept her head high. "I am not nothing," she reminded herself. "I am Zara." The village elder, a tall man with deep-set eyes and a calm but commanding presence, raised his hand to silence the murmurs. "Today," he announced, "we see what our children have learned. Every answer, every skill matters. Let truth speak." The first round began. Questions about numbers, letters, and simple reasoning were asked aloud. Zara's hands were steady, her narrow oval face calm, and her almond-shaped eyes sharp as she traced the answers on her notebook before stepping forward confidently. When a particularly tricky question came, one that stumped most of the older children, Zara's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of every whisper, every doubtful look in the crowd. But she closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the nights she had spent tracing numbers in the dim glow of a lamp, the rain-soaked mornings she had run for her life, the quiet encouragement of the woman who had never called her nothing. She opened her eyes and spoke clearly. "The answer is 32, she said, her voice calm, carrying across the square. The crowd fell silent. A few whispered to each other. The elder nodded slowly. "Correct," he said, his voice carrying approval. From that moment, the tone of the crowd shifted. Children who had mocked her before glanced at her with newfound curiosity. Adults who had ignored her stopped and watched, their eyes no longer dismissive. Even the boy who had whispered about her being slow now looked at her with respect. Round after round, Zara answered with precision and confidence. Each correct answer was another blow against the word that had defined her for years. Each response echoed the hours of practice, the nights spent tracing numbers, the rain that had chased her, the hunger she had endured, and the resilience she had built. By the final round, the square was alive with anticipation. The elder's gaze swept across the children. "This is the last question," he announced. "Solve it, and show us all what you have learned." Zara stepped forward, notebook open, hand steady. Her dark brown skin glowed in the afternoon sun, her narrow oval face composed, her large almond-shaped eyes alight with quiet fire. She read the question carefully, traced the numbers and letters in her mind, and wrote the answer. The elder examined it slowly, then looked up. "Correct," he said, a small smile forming on his lips. "You have shown us all that knowledge and determination outweigh labels." A murmur of admiration spread through the crowd. Zara's classmates rushed to her side, clapping her on the back and whispering congratulations. Even some of the adults nodded in approval. For the first time, the word nothing had no place. She had faced a community, a public test, and had emerged victorious, not just in knowledge but in spirit. That night, as she sat by the lamp, tracing letters and numbers, Zara whispered softly to herself, "I am not nothing. I am seen." I am learning. I am growing. And she knew deep in her chest that the journey was only beginning. A few days after the village challenge, the woman led Zara to a small building at the edge of the village. Its walls were simple clay, and the roof was thatched, but inside it was a sanctuary of learning. Children of all ages were seated on mats, some writing, some reading, some quietly discussing lessons. Zara stepped inside, her dark brown skin glowing in the soft morning light, her narrow oval face a mixture of curiosity and determination, and her large almond-shaped eyes scanning every detail. Her short, tightly braided hair remained neat, and her small hands clutched her notebook as though it contained her entire world. The woman knelt beside her. "This is a place for those who want to learn," she said softly. "You are welcome here. You can read, write, ask questions, and grow." Zara swallowed hard. She had never been in a place so full of children who, like her, sought knowledge. Some glanced at her curiously, some smiled, some whispered quietly. But no one mocked. No one pushed her aside. For the first time she felt a sense of belonging. A boy with dark brown skin, round face, and lively eyes approached. "Hi, I'm Musa. Want to share a mat?" Zara hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. Her narrow oval face relaxed slightly, and her large almond-shaped eyes softened. They sat together, tracing letters and numbers, helping each other solve small problems. Children began to gather around, drawn to Zara's quiet focus and precision. Her presence encouraged others, her determination infectious. The teacher of the center, a tall woman with dark brown skin and calm eyes, noticed Zara immediately. "You have a strong spirit," she said. "Come. I'll help you learn even more." Zara's heart raced. She had learned so much in the village school, but here she could grow faster, reach further. She followed the teacher to a small table, sitting with her notebook open, hands ready. Hours passed. Zara traced numbers, practiced letters, and solved problems she had never seen before. Each correct answer brought a quiet smile to her narrow oval face, and her large almond-shaped eyes sparkled with pride. During a break, she looked around at the other children, their faces eager, their voices bright. I've never seen a place like this," she said softly. One of the older girls smiled. "Neither had I," she replied. "But it's amazing, isn't it?" Zara nodded, her chest swelling with something new, belonging. She realized that this was more than learning. It was a place where her voice mattered, where her mind could shine, where she was not called nothing. When the day ended, she returned home, notebook in hand, feeling both tired and exhilarated. She sat by the lamp, tracing letters and numbers, whispering softly, "I am more than they said. I am learning. I am growing. I am Zara." For the first time, she imagined a future beyond the village, beyond ridicule and fear. She imagined herself strong, confident, and unafraid. And for the first time, that future felt possible. Weeks passed, and Zara's determination grew with every lesson at the learning center. Her hands, once trembling over pencils and notebooks, now moved with precision. Her narrow oval face carried the quiet focus of someone who had endured struggle and emerged determined. Her large almond-shaped eyes shone with intelligence and confidence. One morning, the center announced a small competition, a chance for each child to demonstrate what they had learned. Zara felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but it was tempered by the quiet fire that had sustained her through years of ridicule and struggle. She stepped forward when her name was called, her dark brown skin glistening in the sunlight streaming through the clay walls, her short, tightly braided hair neat, and her small hands clutching her notebook like a shield and a sword all at once. The challenge was simple on paper but required both speed and accuracy. Zara traced letters, counted numbers, and solved problems faster than she ever had before. Her narrow oval face remained calm, lips pressed together in concentration, and her large almond-shaped eyes followed every line, every symbol. The teacher's voice echoed in the room. "Correct. Excellent. Perfect." When the results were announced, Zara had the highest score. The other children clapped and cheered, and for the first time, she felt the pure joy of recognition. Her small frame, usually invisible in the shadows of the village, now stood tall. She smiled shyly, her narrow face glowing with pride, and her large almond-shaped eyes sparkled as the applause washed over her. One of the girls who had once mocked her approached. I didn't think you could do it," she admitted softly. Zara nodded, a quiet smile on her lips. "Neither did I sometimes," she replied. But I had to try. And I will keep trying. The teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You've shown everyone here that hard work and determination can overcome any label. You are no longer nothing. You are someone to watch. That evening, as Zara traced letters and numbers by the lamp, she felt a warmth in her chest that she had never felt before. Not just pride but confidence. Not just accomplishment but belonging. For years, the village had called her nothing. For years she had believed it or at least feared it. But now, with the first proof of her knowledge and skill, she realized. She had always been more than nothing. She was Zara, strong, determined, intelligent, and unstoppable. Her hands hovered over her notebook as she whispered softly, I am not nothing. I am more than anyone said I could be. I am me. And for the first time, the word nothing held no power over her at all. News of Zara's success at the learning center spread quickly through the village. Whispers that had once ridiculed her now carried curiosity, then respect. Children who had ignored her walked past with hesitant smiles. Adults stopped their work to watch the girl they had once dismissed. The village elder called a small gathering in the central square. Zara approached, her dark brown skin glowing in the morning sun, narrow oval face calm but proud, and her large almond-shaped eyes alert and steady. Her short, tightly braided hair remained neat, and her small hands clutched her notebook, the symbol of her persistence and growth. Today, the elder announced, we recognize a child who has shown us all what determination, courage, and learning can achieve. She has proven that names and labels do not define a person. Zara stepped forward. The crowd parted slightly as Zara walked to the center. Whispers filled the air, and she could feel the weight of every gaze. Some faces were amazed, some curious, some hesitant. When she reached the center, the elder smiled. Zara, you have faced hardship, ridicule, and doubt. Yet you persevered, learned, and grew. For that, the village honors you today. You are no longer nothing. You are an example to us all. The crowd erupted in applause. Children cheered, some jumping in excitement. Adults clapped, nodding and murmuring words of approval. For Zara, the sound was overwhelming, yet beautiful. Her narrow oval face softened with joy, and her large almond-shaped eyes glistened with unshed tears. A girl who had once mocked her stepped forward. I'm sorry for what I said, she said quietly. You've shown me how wrong I was. Zara nodded, a gentle smile on her lips. It's okay. I just kept going. The woman who had saved her from the rain stood at the edge of the crowd, smiling quietly, pride shining in her deep brown eyes. She motioned subtly to Zara, who acknowledged her with a small nod. The journey from fear to respect had been long, but it had been worth every step. Zara opened her notebook, flipping through pages filled with numbers, letters, and lessons she had learned. She traced a line with her fingers, whispering softly, I am Zara. I am learning. I am seen. I am more than nothing. The village now saw her as more than the girl they had dismissed. They saw courage. They saw perseverance. They saw someone who refused to be defined by fear or insult. For the first time, Zara walked through the village without shrinking from stares. She walked tall, proud, and unafraid. She had transformed not just herself, but the way others perceived her. And as she returned home that evening, she knew that her journey was far from over, but she was ready. She was Zara, the girl they had once called nothing. And now she was everything she had chosen to become. Years had passed since the village had called her nothing. Zara had grown into a young woman, her dark brown skin radiant, narrow oval face now strong and confident, and her large almond-shaped eyes full of quiet wisdom and determination. Her short, tightly braided hair framed her face, practical and neat, just as it had been since childhood, a symbol of her roots and resilience. She walked through the village, now recognized and respected by all. Children waved at her, adults nodded in acknowledgement, and the whispers that once sought to belittle her had vanished, replaced with admiration. Zara had become a teacher at the same learning center that had once been her sanctuary. She guided children patiently, showing them the same kindness and support the woman had shown her. Her voice was calm and strong, carrying encouragement instead of judgment. You can do it, she would tell them, tracing letters with their hands. Even if others call you nothing, knowledge makes you seen. Persistence makes you strong. Her students listened wide-eyed and attentive, inspired by her story. They watched her narrow face light up with pride as they mastered new skills, and they learned from the determination shining in her large almond-shaped eyes. One afternoon, a young girl approached her timidly, clutching a worn notebook. "Miss Zara, I'm afraid I can't do it," she whispered. Zara knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You've already started," she said gently. "That is enough. One step at a time. You are not nothing. You are learning. And that is everything." The girl nodded, encouraged, and began tracing letters once more. At home that evening, Zara sat by the lamp, the soft light casting gentle shadows across her narrow oval face. Her notebook lay open before her, filled with lessons, reflections, and plans for the future. She traced a line of numbers and whispered to herself, "I am Zara. I am seen. I am learning. I am everything I choose to be." Her journey from fear, shame, and the name nothing had transformed her. She had learned, grown, and helped others grow. She had taken control of her story, and in doing so, she had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had been dismissed, ignored, or underestimated. As the camera of this story would fade to black, her voice echoed softly, carrying a final message. No matter what they call you, no matter what they say, you are more than their words. You are capable. You are strong. You are seen. And the world will know your name. Just start. Keep going. Believe. If you enjoyed Zara's journey, don't forget to like this video, comment your favorite part of her story, and subscribe for more inspiring stories from African folklore and beyond. Your support helps these stories reach hearts everywhere. And with that, Zara's story, the girl they once called nothing, had become everything.